Okay, in the last video we talked about the box model and we took a look at that. In this video we'll take a look at more HTML elements and how to create them. One thing I want to emphasize is that although HTML is the structure of the page, as designers we really focus on the CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. HTML is a markup language, and markup languages have tags, so that's why we use these angle brackets. So for example, this open bracket will start a tag, and then if I say H1, that would be a tag, and then I would need some content for the tag. I'm just going to call this header. And then I need to close that tag, and the way that I close it is in the same fashion. I open up the tag, I put a forward slash, and then I repeat the tag name, and then I close the bracket. So all HTML tags are pretty much this way. What I'm doing here is I have an open tag of H1, I have a closing tag of H1, and then I have the content of H1. And H1 is a heading level tag. There are 6 level heading tags in HTML. This is the largest heading tag. And we can style that with CSS. So over here, for example, if I were to type in H1, that is what's called a selector. And then I open up a set of curly braces. And in those curly braces, I would use properties and values in order to change that header. So for example, I don't particularly like the font that is the default font. Now, where is it getting that default font? Again, it's getting it from the browser preferences. So the browser preferences in Chrome here are probably set to Times or Times New Roman or something like that. So to override that, we can use what's called a style sheet and a CSS style sheet to override that with styles that have a selector, and this is the selector, with properties and values. So to change the font, I'll just type in font family, followed by a colon. So that's the property, and then you need a value. So in the value, I'm going to specify a font family, and the font family that I'm going to specify, I want to specify a sans serif face. So maybe I say Helvetica, sans serif. And I'm using a comma here to separate the two choices. So what this is going to do is the browser is going to look at this, and it's going to say the browser preference is Times. So it would initially render this in Times, but then it's going to look at the user style sheet, or the style sheet that's attached to this document, and then it's going to look at the style, and it's going to override that style with Helvetica. And if Helvetica is not available, it'll make it into whatever sans serif font is available on the system. That could be anything that's loaded onto the system if Helvetica is not available. So that's the font family. And then I can affect the size of the font with font size. So if I go down, I add another property, font size. Now, size can be a number of different types of units of measure. It could be pixels, it could be ems, it could be rems, it could be percent, it could be inches. There's a bunch of different ways that you can put values in or use units of measure inside of HTML. Right now, it's how is this getting this size? So if I were to go into Chrome and I go into my preferences and I go to right here, font size is a medium font size, and it tells me that it's using this theme. And it doesn't really say what the size of that heading level 1 is, but there is a style sheet inside of the browser that's determining the size of that text. So I want to override that. So let's say I want this to be 28 pixels. If I type in that, so it looks like it was less than that, maybe it was 32. So I can change this to 48 pixels, and you can see that that changes right there. And there are other values, properties and value pairs that you can add. You can see here that I have two. I have one for font family, and then on the next line I have one for font size. And those two are affecting this text right here. Now, an H1 is another block level element. So a block level element, as we saw in the last video, has its own margin, padding, and border. And what happens with block level elements is they push other elements down below it. So for example, in my HTML structure here, I'm just going to go down a line. Now you don't have to go down a line, but it makes it easier for us to understand the sequence of events and the order of the HTML file just by adding spaces and returns. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a paragraph element. So that's the P tag. And I'm going to just type in some text. This is the HTML paragraph. And then I'll put in the closing P tag. And now I get a P paragraph. And notice what happened to the paragraph. Now this space that I created by hitting the return key, if I remove it, it doesn't affect the way that this renders in the browser. What's happening is that this block level element pushes the next element down below it, and a P tag, I believe, is a block level element as well. So what I want to show you here, let's first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this property and value. I'm going to cut that out of the H1. And I want to make that universal. So I'm going to put that into the body tag. Now the body tag is this entire area that you're looking at right here. This whole section is the body within the HTML structure. So now the font family is applied to all the elements in the document, not just the H1, but all the elements. Now, there's space in between the header and the P text, and that comes from the fact that this is a block level element. So it has, by default, it has its own padding, it has its own margin elements, and that's what we're seeing here with the space in between. Now, some elements are not block level elements, and for example, a link tag, if I want to make something a link that goes to another website, that's not a block level element. So if I were to go inside of this text and I would put in a link tag, so I'm opening a bracket a href equals, and I'll just put in a website like this, and then I need to close that tag. You'll see that that didn't make a change in the paragraph. The text didn't go down. That's because this is not a block level element. This is what's called an inline element. So inline elements don't affect or don't push other elements around. This can't have margin, it doesn't have padding, and it doesn't have a border. So for example, if in CSS I tried to give it those values, so if I were to target the A tag, and that's the selector for that tag, I'm using A, and I would try to give it margin dash left 25 pixels, for example, you'll see that that actually does work here. And let's see if I give it a padding left. That also works as well. And let's see if it has, if we can do a border. So if I do a border, 1 pixel, solid, pound, it does allow you to do that. So it's an inline element, but it does have block level properties. And that's because links now can behave like buttons. I can make this, if I were to continue with these styles, I can make this look more like a button. So there are some elements that are both inline and block. So, and that's This A tag is one of them. Another tag that is an inline element is, if I want to make this italic, I can use this tag called M for emphasis, and that will make this italic. And then that's just an inline element. It's not a block level element. Okay, so we'll continue looking at other elements as we go, and you can see working in CodePen has its advantages because you get immediate feedback and you can see live what it is that you're doing.